Good evening, this is Genevieve from ETM 101 Weather and Climate of Alaska. This is for Units 13 and 14. Two other locations we'll be talking about in Alaska are Anchorage and Eielson. Hope I said that right. Anchorage is located 61 degrees north at 50 degrees west, in the Cook Inlet region, and Eielson is at 65 degrees north and 147 degrees west in the interior region. The 2 weeks we'll be observing and talking about is January 30th through February 5th, 2017, and March 20th through March 26th, 2017. What we have here is the station data for Anchorage and Eielson, recorded from January 30th through February 5th, 2017. The 3 graphs we will be looking at today measure temperature, pressure, and humidity. The 2 days that we will be looking at closely for observation is January 31st and February 4th. Starting with Anchorage, looking at January 31st, the maximum temperature recorded was a temperature of about 37 degrees Fahrenheit. Minimum temperature that day was about 27 degrees Fahrenheit. The temperature range was about 10 degrees, and the mean temperature was 32 degrees Fahrenheit. This, compared to the climatology temperature, shows a 4-degree difference. On February 4th, the maximum temperature was recorded at about 23 degrees Fahrenheit, minimum at about 8 degrees Fahrenheit. The temperature range of 15 degrees and a mean temperature of 16 degrees. This data compared to the climatology temperature showed about a 12-degree difference. Now, taking a look at that whole week, we see that starting from January 30th through the 1st, the temperatures are a lot higher than the average, and from February 2nd through the 5th, there is somewhat consistent. However, the minimum temperatures are below the average, and slightly again decreasing as the week goes on. In Eielson, on January 31st, there was a maximum temperature of 3 degrees Fahrenheit, a minimum temperature of 0 degrees Fahrenheit, temperature range of 13 degrees Fahrenheit, and a mean temperature of 7 degrees Fahrenheit. With this data, compared to the climatology temperature, there's about 11-degree difference. On February 4th, there was a maximum temperature of 3 degrees Fahrenheit, a minimum temperature of negative 17 degrees Fahrenheit, with a temperature range of 14 degrees Fahrenheit, and a mean temperature of negative 10 degrees Fahrenheit. And again, the average of this data compared to the climatology temperature showed about a 6-degree difference. Now, looking at the whole week, we could see that on the 30th, temperatures were pretty low, and as they were getting lower, all of a sudden it started to increase until the end of January 31st. And starting on the first couple of days in February, it remains kind of constant. However, the minimum temperatures are slightly below the average. With the data or information provided to us, it shows that in Anchorage on February 2nd, the sun starts to rise at about 9:19 a.m. and sets at about 5:08 p.m. And Anchorage's maximum solar elevation is at 12 degrees with a relative solar radiance of 42%. In Eielson on February 2nd, the sun rises at 9:31 a.m. and sets at 4:34 p.m. So very close. Eilson's maximum solar elevation goes from 9 degrees with a relative solar irradiance of 91%. As we can see in the Anchorage pressure graph, the highest pressure recorded was somewhere between the 1st and 2nd of February at about 1,040 millibars. And as the week goes on, we notice that the pressure gradually decreases, reaching at about 1,014 millibars. Specifically on January 31st, the maximum pressure recorded was about 1,035 millibars, minimum being 1,025 millibars. On February 4th, maximum pressure was about 1,028 millibars, the minimum pressure of 1,021 millibars. As for the Eilson pressure graph, we see that it follows a similar pattern, having a pressure towards the middle of the week, and it looks like it's about 1,048 millibars, and again gradually declining as the week goes on. However, it gets to about 1,020 millibars, which is still higher than Anchorage's graph. So far what we are seeing is proof of a high and low pressure system moving about the Alaskan area. Now looking at this graph that measures humidity, we see the dew point temperature and the relative humidity in percentages. On January 31st in Anchorage, the daily dew point temperature maximum was about 28 degrees Fahrenheit with a minimum of 25 degrees Fahrenheit. On February 4th, the max was 19 degrees Fahrenheit with a minimum temperature of 3 degrees Fahrenheit. The dew point temperature is about 20 degrees from January 30th to the 1st compared to the rest of the week, where the dew point temperatures are about 20 degrees Fahrenheit or lower. Relative humidity remains somewhat constant, with this lowest measure recorded on January 30th at about 60%. Now looking at the relative humidity and the dew point temperature in Anchorage, we see that despite the variation in dew point temperature, the relative humidity remains somewhat constant, indicating that earlier in the week there's a lot of moisture in the air and humidity, and throughout the rest of the week we'll be experiencing less humid air. Now looking at the Eilson humidity graph, on January 31st, the maximum temperature was about 9 degrees Fahrenheit for the daily dew point temperature and a minimum of -8 degrees Fahrenheit. On February 4th, the daily dew temperature max was about -3 degrees Fahrenheit and a minimum being at -22. Relative humidity, again, remains somewhat constant throughout the week despite the variations in dew point temperature. Taking a closer look at the humidity graph for Eilson, we see that the dew point temperatures do vary throughout the day. We've got to remember that the sun is rising at about 9:30 a.m. and setting at about 4:30, which is why their peaks are a lot closer. Okay, moving on. The two stars indicate Anchorage, again in the Cook Inlet area, and Eilson, which is in the interior. We see right away that Anchorage is affected by a low pressure system, bringing in a stationary front directly impacting the Anchorage area. The mean temperature for Anchorage is about 32 degrees Fahrenheit, and with the higher temperatures and lower pressures in the air, clouds are converging aloft, causing cloud coverage and rain, and because of this, there's high humidity. As for Eilson, the high and low pressure system are affecting the region. The region is also experiencing higher than average temperatures, not as high as Anchorage, and then also because the dew point temperature and relative humidity measurements were nearly the same, clouds were able to perform. Winds are coming from the south area, seems like trying to get into the more northern part. On Saturday, February 4th, by the end of the week, high pressure systems dominate the whole area. In Anchorage, temperatures have dropped with the maximum being 23 degrees and the minimum being 8. On January 31st, the high pressure systems were high, measuring at about 1,040 millibars, and towards the end of the week we see it drop to about 1,030, 1,025, and because of the high pressure, it looks like there's a thin layer of clouds in the sky with little moisture in the air. In looking at the isobars from the 31st to the 4th, we see that the wind speed has decreased and is northerly, heading towards the southeast. Now here's the map and GeoES images for January 31st. Again, this day was experiencing the stationary front image. There's a lot of moisture, cloud coverage in the area, and we see that with the infrared satellites and within the visible satellite images, and as well as the water vapor area. Infrared shows us a cloud coverage, water vapor shows us the amount of moisture that is in the air, and the visible satellite shows us the amount of, albedo in the surface or in the sky. So it seems that there's about a thin cloud right over here, or not a thin cloud, but a lower level of albedo reflecting some solar rays back into the universe. We see here with the February 4th map and GeoES images, because of the dominating high pressure systems, there's lesser clouds. As you look at the infrared, we see little to no cloud coverage, and in the visible image we see that our areas have a lower amount of albedo in the sky, but it looks like solar radiation is bouncing off from the Earth and trying to get through thin layer of clouds. And in the water vapor satellite image, we see a drier area taking over the interior and Cook Inlet part of Alaska. And again, similar data, except this is for March, Anchorage, and Ilsen. Just want to kind of breeze through this. We do see that maximum minimum temperatures are below their average at Anchorage. Same with Ilsen, however, the temperature variability is a lot more drastic. Pressure systems seem to be, or pattern seems to be the same throughout the week, increasing and decreasing. So there's a mixture of high and low pressure systems going on, and then compared to the humidity charts, we see that there is moisture, so moisture throughout the week. Let's see why. Okay, on March 21st, we see a stationary front headed towards the Anchorage and Ilsen areas. Weather systems, winds, and seems to be coming strong from the south. However, there is a high pressure system still trying to dominate the northern part of Alaska. There does also seem to be a thin layer of cloud coverage in the area, however, probably not enough to cause any precipitation. On March 25th, we now see the low pressure system dominating, coming from the southeastern areas. More east of Alaska, we do see a huge low pressure system going on with a lot of cloud coverage and snow happening. However, because of the high pressure system near, these areas seem to fall in the middle of being affected by the drier but warmer temperatures, and the wind does seem to decrease in strength, and clouds thin layer again, however, few moisture in the area where Anchorage and Ilsen are. Using the satellites to kind of clarify our data, we see the infrared does show some sort of cloud coverage, also a very thin layer. In the visible satellite image area, cloud coverage does provide some sort of albedo effect, and according to the water vapor area, we do see dryness within the regions that we are focusing on. March 25th, again, it seems to be a little bit similar to the last graph. Again, few cloud coverage in our region except towards the east. Some sort of albedo in the visible satellite, and again, dry area according to our water vapor graph, our map. Based on this data, we see that changes in temperature, pressure, and humidity can change throughout the day, which is an example of the diurnal cycle, which is different than a movement of a massive air, because these variables change as the Earth rotates. The daily minimum temperatures that we saw were lower in March compared to January, February, which reflects stronger radiative cooling. Well, that's all I have. I hope that you guys enjoyed my presentation, and forgive me if I forgot anything. Thank you, and good night.